Hello, listeners, and welcome back to OTRA VEZ FRASIER. I am your co-host, Denisse.
And I'm your co-host, Theo.
And we are on episode 2 of Frasier, titled Space Quest. How are you feeling after that first episode breakdown?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling interested in,
Your interest has been piqued.
My interest has been piqued, I suppose. I've dabbled a little, and I'm dabbling some more, I suppose, because this is barely the second episode.
Right. You're still your big toe was in the water. Now we're up to the ankle.
Ooh, up to the ankle already? Oh my.
we move fast over here. Well, last episode was dealt with some heavy topics, but it was in a pretty lighthearted way. Like I said before, it is a sitcom, so they are going to deal with things like this mostly. And we were introduced to many new characters on the first episode, including Martin, including Daphne, including Niles Crane, and including the lovely Ross, as well as, of course, the main character, which the show is named after, Frasier.
Woo!
In this episode, we are also introduced to another character. We're introduced to a new character named Bulldog. Now,
rings a bell.
Now, I have to be honest. I do not remember if they mentioned Bulldog's full name or if they just say Bulldog. I did not make any note of his actual name, so I don't think they did. So we're going to be referring to him as Bulldog throughout the rest of this podcast.
Maybe Bull's his first name and Dog's his last name. Dog, bull.
Yeah, maybe. But Bulldog's real name is Dan Butler. And Dan Butler actually was a reoccurring, kind of those like reoccurring characters that are not necessarily main characters, but appear every so often, like maybe once or twice during a season in the Roseanne sitcom.
Really?
Yeah.
No fucking way.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the original Roseanne. I'm talking 80s, 90s Roseanne, not well, Roseanne was in the 90s, right?
I think it was in the 90s, yeah.
90s Roseanne. I'm not talking about, Roseanne's then, they killed her off and turned into the Connors Roseanne. I'm talking about old school Roseanne. And he played a completely different character than Bulldog in Roseanne. Well, you're going to meet him soon, but he's definitely the definition of fucking like short man syndrome. And listen, no fucking hate because I'm 4'11". Like full disclosure, I'm 4'11". I have dated short man. Actually, all of the men that I've dated have been short man, unfortunately.
I'm so sorry.
But he is definitely a very petite looking man. He's a very petite looking man. He is not a bad looking man. He's handsome. I think he's a handsome man. He just happens to be short. And within this series, he is like the ultimate alpha male, kind of like rub some dirt on it type of guy. Walk it off.
Ew.
Type of guy.
Ew.
Yes. He definitely, within these trying times, girl, he definitely gives me very much, doesn't wear a mask, doesn't need the vaccine type of shit. type of man. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's unfair, to say that about him, but that's kind of the vibe that he gives off.
Ew. Is he like a Joe Rogan type dude?
Bitch, yes.
Ew.
Bitch, yes. I think he would be Joe Rogan's like sidekick or contender within the radio / podcast game.
Okay.
But in Roseanne, he was this very like meek and not delicate, but very shy and reserved accountant for Roseanne. And he was very kind of reserved. In one of the episodes, I think, of Roseanne, he wanted to ask Jackie out, but he was too nervous to do so. And with Bulldog, he wouldn't even ask anybody out. He would just be like, he would go up to a woman and just be like, okay, you're going on a date with me. Like, there's no questions about it. Like, why would I even have to ask you? Because of course you would want to go on a date with me. I'm Bulldog. I have one of them, the top, radio sports shows,
He's one of those alpha male types.
Most definitely alpha male type shit. most definitely red pill, blue pill type of motherfucker.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And
So
he's a short man?
And he's short.
Okay, it's
I
adding
mean-
it's adding up.
I mean, I don't know how short he is, but Frasier to me does seem like a tall man. But no, but I mean, even without Frasier for reference, just like other cast members that I remember seeing, him next to, he definitely gives off petite vibes, and his personality within this character Bulldog definitely gives off short man syndrome.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we get to meet this character, and this is an episode that is again, it is the second episode, but so it is again a setup episode. We meet a lot of characters recently, and they're still being set up. We're still getting to know them. So last episode, we got to meet the lovely Ross, and in this episode, we already know her and we're familiar with her. And she, in the first episode, seemed like a very intelligent, seemed like a very, capable and independent woman. She's a producer on this very successful talk show with the psychiatrist.
Yeah, she's a girl boss. Oh.
Exactly. She's a girl boss. But within this episode, we get to meet a little bit more about herself as a person outside of the workplace. And there's this one very particular scene, and it's definitely an interesting choice how they put this scene on the second episode. You know what I mean? So the writers are very intentionally and almost very quickly trying to set up the characters, trying to make you seem, okay, who's the fucking most neurotic of the group? Who is the comedic relief of the group? Who is the most intelligent? Who is the dumbest? Who is the quirkiest? And who is also the sluttiest? And I say that with all due respect, because within the series, you will start to realize that many of the characters, including Frasier and including Niles, oftentimes crack jokes about Ross's sexuality. And in this episode, we get to see that a little bit at first glance. That's kind of like the writers kind of setting up, her character a little bit. And Frasier walks in on Ross having a phone call, talking about this date that she went on, talking about this man that she had a date, and then she brought him back to, I guess, her place, and they engaged in sex. They're both consenting adults, and she's going into detail as to her not being pleased, her not being, him not being able to please her during sex. And that, I think, is very telling. This is a woman who is not afraid to have sex with a man that she's not, seriously connected to. And also, she has had enough sex to be able to say, this man just was not able to please me. You know what I mean? Within my sexual fantasies. Uh-huh. And then at the end of that conversation, we learned that she's actually on the phone with her mother. This is not a girlfriend conversation. She's having this conversation with her mother.
Good for her.
And Frasier seems very taken aback by the fact that it's her mother. And Ross just says, me and my mother are very close, and we talk about everything. This is normal. Like, this is a normal conversation that we have. And Ross sees nothing wrong with it. And also Ross takes no shame in her conversation with her mother. And even when, Frasier makes, a snarky look or a snarky remark at her. So I think that even though we were already introduced to Ross, I think that's a very important introduction to the character that is Ross, that was not in the first episode. And you be prepared to hear more about that.
Okay.
That is the main reason. That is one of the main reasons, not the only, but one of the main reasons why I do mention Ross is a very feminist character, particularly for her time. She's a single woman. She is a very successful, independent single woman. And on top of that, she does not limit herself to her sexual pleasures. And she is not ashamed about it. She does not move in secret about it. She doesn't take shame in it, which I think is very different. You know what I mean? Than if a character is, successful, but then secretly also having this adventurous sex life, but with, you know, separate from her character and from her workplace. And Ross does not seem to mind the two intermingling.
That's good. I do enjoy the fact that she like doesn't take it back, you know.
Right. And you know, that part is enjoyable. Well, will not be so enjoyable for you because it is not for me. It's all the other characters just, you know, constantly giving her one-liners about her sex life.
So you're telling me Frasier and other people aren't feminists in this show? And that is set in the 90s?
I mean, you're gonna have to watch the show. But I mean, you know, you're gonna have to watch the show. There's a lot of things within the series that, as progressive as it was, I mean, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. But overall, the premise of this episode, again, we are back to adjustments and getting acquainted with different company. Frasier is still getting used to his father living there, and not just his father, but his dog, and now also his caretaker Daphne. He is getting used to being disrupted of his normal routine. And it's so funny because I made a note here saying that Frasier was actually the original morning beauty routine guru. I don't know if you're familiar with that whole trend on TikTok and YouTube where people post their completely unrelatable morning routines.
Oh yeah. They're like, I wake up and I meditate and I write down my dreams, and then I start with like a really weird smoothie or something like that.
A 5-minute gratitude journal. Which, listen, I want to buy one. It's not, I'm not hating on it, but
they get ready and they go to work, and I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You wake up 5 minutes before you're supposed to get out of like bed and go to work, and you skip breakfast. And you head into work with a headache like the rest of us.
I mean, yeah, you know, it's like, it's the ideal, right? It's what we all strive for.
It's the ideal.
I mean, listen, not to be crass, but who does not try to achieve an American Psycho disciplinary routine? You know what I mean? That really is the dream, to be able to have that privilege, to be able to have that time, and to be able to have that drive.
No, yeah, that's self-care. And it's like, when I feel like when people mock that sort of like trend that's going on, it's not like a mocking of that person itself, but the fact that it's so unattainable and it seems luxurious to the fact that it's become a trend. Because it's like only things that like you want to strive to are trends, you know?
Right.
So right. If something was easy to do, it wouldn't be a trend.
Exactly. So if something is easily attainable, it is not special.
Yeah.
And for Frasier, his morning routine consisted of reading a crisp newspaper, drinking his preferred Starbucks blend coffee. Yes, they did mention the word Starbucks.
Really? They could afford that?
I really do wonder what the value for Starbucks was during the time that episode. We should probably look into that for your
But maybe they really wanted to make that commitment considering the fact that it's Seattle, you know?
Well, yeah, but that's also what I'm wondering. It's how popular was Starbucks?
Oh, back then. You're right.
That's what I wonder. It's like Starbucks now is really one of the many pillars that hold the United States together.
Oh, it's one of the pillars that holds me together.
I mean, at this point, it's a much better running branch. You know what I mean? To the fucking U.S. government. Like, it really is. It really has its own purpose. It's like, I'm not the biggest Starbucks fan, but you cannot deny its impact. You cannot deny the availability it has. You can't deny the cultural impact and significance the Starbucks brand and infrastructure has on this fucking country. Like, you just can't deny it. And I wonder if in the 90s that this episode was filmed, if it still held the same star power, if it still held the same impact. We should probably look that up for your second episode.
I will.
And because I wonder if if the mentioning of Frasier definitely had something to do with that. I mean, listen, Seattle has always been a trendsetter. It really has. For music, Coffee specifically, many of the coffee brands that we know and love started within Seattle as well. It's definitely a kind of trendy, hipsterish place. And I wonder if Starbucks at that point was already kicking off, developing itself, entering within the American mindset, as part of a daily routine. I mean, at this point, a Starbucks run is an errand run. You know what I mean? Like, Starbucks is an errand for many people. And I wonder if when Frasier mentions that already is the case, or Starbucks is starting to build itself up to be a crucial part of our culture. But coming back to it, he mentioned Starbucks by name. He drops that Starbucks name. And that, to me, was a big whoa, I mean, because now Starbucks is a huge brand to just like, I mean, I can remember a sitcom saying a brand like that specifically.
Yeah. No, yeah.
I mean, it's like, what? You're watching, what's a show that's on right now? Like, you're watching This Is Us, and some guy, the main character, is being like, oh, I'm going to the store to buy some LaCroix. Or is that how you pronounce it? LaCroix?
LaCroix.
LaCroix. No, it's not LaCroix. It's LaCroix, I think. Or
is
like
it?
That. Yeah. It's not LaCroix. Definitely not.
No?
But it's like, that would never happen. I mean, that just would never happen. That brand, that name drop like that just would not, I don't think would easily happen.
Yeah. Unless it's like a very like high funded show. Like, I'd say like an HBO Max show could afford to say things like that.
Yes, most likely.
But like a run-of-the-mill like sitcom,
right?
It's very rare, I feel like.
Right. I mean, I'm trying to just came to mind that whole Seinfeld episode with the junior mints.
I'm not.
You're not familiar?
See, you're more versed than Seinfeld, so.
Okay, well, we're not even gonna get into it because this is not a Seinfeld episode. But they mention, and they show the box of junior mints within that Seinfeld episode. Oh. Yes, but I mean, also you cannot compare junior mints to Starbucks. Like the impact that it has.
Although I do love junior mints.
I mean, that was my favorite candy growing up as a little kid. I don't know what other kids that love junior mints as much as I did. But
when we went to the movie theaters,
yeah.
Ordering the fucking junior mints.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But so that was part of his morning routine, and Frasier basically he makes a big statement that if one thing is taken out of order from his morning routine, it sets him up for failure for the rest of the day. He really does mention the whole fucking domino effect of just malalignment within his whole fucking day, and thus, being able to make a disservice to his listeners by not being able to provide accurate therapy advice or whatever the fuck he does in his show. Oh, we're not being able to read a crisp newspaper. Within this episode, bitch, the newspaper was fully intact. The only thing was that Martin had already read it, and therefore he had opened it and removed the rubber band that seals that newspaper. And Frasier could not deal with the fact that he did not have a rubber band to remove because the paper has already been read, and it is no longer crisp.
Oh, that's so sad. Oh my god. I can't believe you're laughing at his pain.
Well, I mean, he does mention that it's a big pain and that it sets him up for failure and that he's no longer, capable of functioning properly.
Yeah,
He's, he really is making a mountain out of a mole. Out of a molehill, not a mole. Molehill.
Out of a mole.
So within that episode, they continue to clash as in the first episode. And finally, Frasier speaks to his father and basically comes up and says, kind of, he speaks about it through lines, but in between lines, but Martin is able to keep, catch up on it. He's not dumb. That it might be best for Martin to move out and Frasier to continue living alone. And but in a surprise twist of events, bitch, Martin was actually like, no, We're not going to do that.
Oh,
Martin was like, I'm not having fun with you either. You are most definitely not my favorite person on this planet.
damn.
I do not like the person that you are when you wake up in the morning. And it's definitely very infuriating for me. But I am not moving out because, like you said, you want a significant relationship with me. And that is not going to happen over the course of a couple of days, over a couple of weeks. That takes years. So we have a long road to go, but it is possible because I love you and you love me and you're my son. So no, I am not moving out. I am not going. We are sticking to this and we are going to make it work.
Damn.
Yeah, which is surprising from Martin's character, particularly what we got to know within the first episode.
Uh-huh.
But it's interesting how in this episode and also the first episode, Martin was always the bigger person.
Uh-huh.
In the first episode, if you recall, Martin was the first one to call, even though he had to sort of role play an apology and a thank you, a form of gratitude for his son for letting him move in and actually paying for a caretaker to come and, assist him. He also in this episode says, no, you wanted this because you want a relationship with me. And if you want a relationship with me, you're going to make this work. That is huge. I mean, listen, you're getting an easy way out. Your son is telling you, I am capable and happy to provide you with your own space and your own caretaker. So we do not have to clash together. But Martin is able to see through that and push through it and say, no, we want a relationship. We're going to make it work. I think that's a big move.
Yeah.
For such a, character that doesn't necessarily is not the best at expressing affection or what's the word, gratitude,
No, yeah, definitely. I think I don't know, I also think it's very interesting that he has that level of commitment compared to Frasier, who, as we saw last episode, doesn't have that same commitment to his own son. It just really kind of sets them apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely does set them apart. And I mean, within the first episode, the writers clearly try to make a line between the Crane boys and the Crane father and how different they are. And even though how the two sons are pretty well respected and well-read psychiatrists does not mean that they are the most agile and
emotionally intelligent.
Yes, exact. That is the perfect way to say it. Emotionally intelligent people, especially around their family.
Yeah.
So this was an interesting episode. It was for Martin is a very I think deep character where if you only see the first episode and you only catch a couple of his one-liners, you're able to make a pretty quick judgment of his character. And then once you take the time to really watch all the episodes and see the interaction he has with his boys and other people around him, you really get to see the type of values and ethics that this man holds deep in his heart.
Oh, that's a sweet thought.
Yeah, and for that, I will make the exception to this one cop.
This is a fictional cop. Fictional cops don't count.
Exactly. To this fictional cop. But another big note, again, we had talked about it within the first episode about why Frasier left Boston and particularly why he left his son. And again, like I said, I'm not familiar with Cheers, so I don't know how much they showed of this. But within this conversation that he was having with his father, he admitted that a few months ago, before he left for Boston, and while he was going through his divorce, he considered suicide.
Dang, really?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, goes to show a psychiatrist, somebody who's extremely well read, very much educated about mental health, about finding help, about medicine for chemical imbalances and depression, considered suicide. it does not matter how well read you are. If life becomes really hard for you, you're the one living in your own head, in your own life. There's nobody else who can help you quite as much as you can help yourself. I thought that was a very impactful confession that he made to his father.
And this is the second episode?
And this is the second episode, bitch. Like I'm telling you, they deal with some really just sad, hardcore, deep themes and issues, and just completely find the way to make them light and not so heavy anymore,
Yeah.
But that scene, you're like, damn, okay, like maybe you did have to leave Boston. Maybe you did have to leave Boston. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I would have left my son, but fuck, like if you really are out
mentally,
here,
it's like maybe that was the only way.
Exactly. If you really are out here just like stepping on ladders and like thinking, thinking about jumping off buildings, like, okay, like maybe you did have to go find some new buildings, because maybe
although one with like one of the highest skyscrapers, maybe not a good idea.
Well, maybe that is a good idea because you can't access skyscrapers easily. Like you can't access the roof. Well, I don't know. Maybe
I guess it would, like, having been to the Space Needle before, it did seem like a very high security place.
It did. But that to me was a huge revelation.
That, that says a lot about him.
But that was pretty much the episode, Space Quest, second episode of the series of season 1. It's a quest for Frasier's space, which I completely relate to. But you and I always shared a room, and up until last year, the year 2021, I actually had the chance to live on my own at first, and now that I'm back to living with roommates and living with other people, particularly family, it's definitely a challenge, especially when you're such as reliant on routine as I am. I don't know about you, if you have anything to share just from what you have heard about this episode so far.
No, yeah, I can definitely relate to that idea. Same sort of scenario where I haven't lived on my own exactly for like a significant period of time. Sometimes my roommates have gone on like vacations, and in that sort of sense, I'll be living on my own for like maybe a week or so. And during those times, it is very nice to like kind of have my own routine without any sort of like interruption or sense of self. I think mainly for me, my biggest thing is like controlling the space the way I want it to be, and maintaining it clean and stuff like that, and like cleaning it the way I want to clean it. Because I think you and me, when we get the idea to do something in our home, we do it. And we don't stop until it's done. And that is not the mindset that like some people that I've lived with in the past have had, where it's just like, okay, I'm tired and I don't want to do it anymore, so let's take a break. And I'm like, you want to take a break?
Right. You want to lose momentum?
And it's like a totally valid thing of theirs, because it's like, it's their own damn life, it's their own damn house. If they want to take a break, they can. Like, they're their own fucking adult. That's the environment they want to live in, and that's like fair. But like, that's just not the way you and me tackle things. I think it also has to do with our attention span, that we know that if we don't do it all in one point, it's just not going to get done.
Yes, we have to ride the wave when it comes.
Yeah.
Because it comes and goes faster than it comes.
Exactly.
Yeah, we really do have to ride that wave. Even if it's maybe, 11 o'clock in the morning. Like, you just really have to ride that wave.
Exactly. So I think it's just, I can relate to the idea of like living with someone and having that sort of like sense of routine or sense of self kind of be interrupted in a way. Because I think my routine wasn't necessarily impeded when we lived together, because we were very like-minded.
Yeah, well, you're raised similarly.
Yeah. Yeah, we just from day one, like, we kind of just, like, had the same space.
Right.
Or at least my day one. You didn't have the same day one as me, since you
Right.
are 4 years older.
Right.
But since my day one, I've been co-living with you.
Right.
For a very long time.
Right.
But then it's, like, living with other people who have very different, like, senses of self. And it's, like, some people that I've lived with in the past have never had to, like, share a living situation with other people before. So it's like, it's just, like, very, very different mindsets.
Yeah, they're not as aware. I know. I remember one time I was talking to this a mutual friend of mine, and I was talking about how I was excited to live on my own, after I had, originally moved in with an ex, and then, things didn't work out. So they moved out and I had the place to myself, for a few months after that. And I was so excited to be able to experience that independence and that autonomy, complete autonomy on my own. And they were like, wait, you've never had a room to yourself? And I said, no, will be my first time, ever having my whole room to myself. And they were like, oh my God, like, I want to cry for you. And I was like, what? And they were like, I want to cry. That's so sad. You've never had your own room and you're 27 years old. And I was like, yeah, well,
I mean, it's not the biggest deal in the world.
It's not the biggest deal in the world, but also it's just something that we couldn't afford. Like, it's just not even you don't even think about that.
You don't mourn it.
You don't mourn it because it's something that I didn't even, and now that I've lived on my own and made my own routines and made my own rules, and did not make a sound from the moment that I clocked out of work until the next morning that I clocked back into work. And now I'm living back with other people in a different house. I definitely do mourn it now. I definitely do miss it now. Although I'm very happy with my living situation at the moment. But it's different and you do miss it. And once you experience that autonomy, complete autonomy, you're just like, whoa, man, like, this really is a privilege. I mean, this really is a privilege in America, particularly in California, to be able to afford.
Yeah.
And I am glad I was able to experience it within that one time. And hopefully in the near future, I'll be able to experience it again,
I think so, babe. I think so.
Thank you. But that was this episode, Space Quest episode 2. I'm excited to see what you think about this episode. You meet a new character, Bulldog, as stated before. You get to meet a little bit more about the character, so you'll be able to start, picking up on their cues and such. So I'm excited for the next episodes to come. So we'll be right back after this short message.
Introducing the new Cafe Nervosa house blend, tossed salads and scrambled eggs. This dark roast coffee includes everything you may need for your morning pick-me-up, including eggshells, beet juice for added depth, and cinnamon for a classic aroma. Get your tossed salad and scrambled eggs house blend today at Cafe Nervosa.
And welcome back, listeners, to the second half of our second episode, covering the episode titled Space Quest. All right. So I finally finished watching it. And I have come away with I'd say not a lot of big thoughts on the show itself.
Okay. Well, I would think not, because it's
episode two. It's episode 2.
Yes.
So it's like the opinions that I've formed from viewing the pilot and this second episode haven't influenced the rest of my opinion and haven't really changed my prior opinion before watching the show.
Okay.
I feel where I still feel like it's a kind of a silly show.
Okay.
To have be your favorite show.
Okay, you think that it's random that this is my favorite show?
Yeah, it's a little random.
Okay.
It's interesting. It gives you a quirk.
Okay.
You're a little quirky.
I'm not like other girls.
You're not like other girls.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Which is not at all something that I'm trying to do, by the way. This is, I'm not picking Frasier specifically to be my favorite show. I just
to be a contrarian.
No, it's not. That's not at all what this battle is about. I just don't know why this show just picked me and stuck with me. I don't know.
It just got a grip on you.
It just got a grip
It just
on
said, we're not letting you go.
Yes.
That white man's gonna haunt you forever. The Lord said, let these 2 white men torment her mind for years and years.
This poor young Mexican woman.
This queer Mexican woman.
Oh my God. Okay.
Okay, going back to my notes. So it didn't really influence my thoughts on the show itself, but I
Okay.
think it is really like pushing in a lot on Frasier's development. So I'm getting to see a lot more of who he is, and it does not also change my opinion of who I thought he was originally from the vibe that I was picking up on him from seeing you watch the show. Where I was like, this man is a hoity-toity, got his knickers in a twist kind of a dude. And he is exactly that.
Did you just say knickers?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
What? You want me to say his chonies? What do you want me to say?
That's all right. I just wanted to make sure you had said knickers. I was like, what the fuck are knickers? And I was like, oh, they're like underwear.
Yeah.
And for a second, I thought you had said Snickers. I was like, because the way you said it, got his sneakers in a twist. I was like, his sneakers in a twist? What? I thought you were making a Snickers and Twix reference. I was like, what the fuck? I was like, what
Got
the
his Reese's peanut butter cups.
Oh my God.
In a crunch bar scenario.
Okay, going back to what you were saying.
He's
I'm sorry.
he's got his Toblerone and
Okay.
a Tobler
No more candy references.
Okay, I'm sorry. Before we get DMCA'd.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, going back to my point. I think it sets up Frasier very well. And I think the lines once him and Martin confront each other regarding like his issues with his space and things like that are also very evident when Martin is just like, okay, there's that scene once he comes back from work and he finds that the house is alone and he starts to finally like pour himself a cup of wine and he reads his book and he gets on the couch and he's all cozied up in there. And then they show up. And at first, Martin kind of tries to, like, bring up some light conversation to, like, connect with him.
All right.
Like, being nice. And then he's just like, I just want some silence to read my book. And then he leaves him alone. And then he's just, like, snaps where he's just like, what are you doing?
Right.
He's like, I'm leaving you alone.
Right.
He's like, I can't fucking stand this shit. And then Martin just kind of goes in on him where he's just like, you have been this way since you were a little kid, and I'm like sick of it, basically. So it kind of just like, it does pull into my theory that Frasier has always been like this.
Right.
But now I am more curious as to like why he was that way to begin with.
Okay.
Where it's like, I get it, you know, personalities are like, that's the beauty of being a human being, where everyone is unique and yada yada. But what happened between the combination of Martin Crane and Mrs. Crane? Do we know her first name?
Yes, they do. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm blanking right now. They do mention it in the show, but
How
I
dare
can't.
you.
I am so sorry, but the name isn't coming up again. It has been many years, okay, since I've watched the series.
How dare you? I thought you were gonna be my wiki,
I mean-
my Frasier wiki.
I mean, I just,
on this journey of ours.
man, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I forgive you because I'm a big enough person to forgive you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're the Martin in the situation.
Oh, I'm being such a Martin right now. I think it's very funny that he kind of just goes in on him. And of course, we learn a little bit more about his childhood in that sort of a sense, and like the things that he finds valuable, which is obviously his space. And I think that's a respectable thing to like kind of want some time to like detox, especially in a job as demanding as being a psychiatrist. Even if his is kind of a more lax form of being like a radio host, I still feel like the profession of having people constantly berate you with issues is probably very draining. And the idea of like then having to come home to like someone who you don't get along with that easily probably doesn't seem that great of an environment to have. So I do sympathize with Frasier in that sort of a sense. But the level of the things that he chooses to pick fights over are the thing that get me.
Right. It's like, are you really going to die on this hill?
Yeah, where I'm like, come on, man. It's a rubber band on a newspaper, buddy. Get over it.
Yeah.
If it was affecting his rubber band ball collection, maybe I'd understand. Because I enjoy a rubber band ball. I've never made one myself, but I've always wanted to. Is that weird to say?
No, it's not weird to say.
No.
I feel like that's a very achievable goal, though, if you really wanted to make
But
one.
like, where would I get rubber bands?
I mean, isn't that part of the journey?
Yeah, but like, in my life, where I don't come across rubber bands easily.
I don't know what to tell you.
And that's the really sad part.
Well, we can Google that after this podcast.
Thank you. But I think that they had a very good like back and forth when they were fighting, and across the episode itself, it was all very good. I think prior to the fight, or essentially the Martin takedown, as I would call it, the scene where he's like reading the book, and Martin's like, "What's it about?" And he's like,
"Right,
it's probably not your thing."
Yeah,
and that sort of thing. After that, the response that Martin does, which is the one-line response, where he just looks at the book and he's just like, thick.
Yeah.
It made me laugh.
Yeah, which I feel like is I think that's such a response, a dad response.
Yeah. It was such a well-written line, and the delivery was also really good.
Yeah, it was such a good dad response, because I remember when you're reading books as a child and then grown-ups being around you, "Oh, that's a big book. That's a big book." That was, to me, was such like a cute father-son moment. Just him being like thick, like almost impressed by, the amount of reading that his son is trying to get through.
Yeah, he's just trying so hard to just really connect to his son in that moment.
Yeah, it is. It was a cute moment. It was a cute attempt for Martin, because he most likely knew that he was not interested.
Yeah, exactly.
In the book. He was just, faking it to be nice.
Mm-hmm. And I think in that moment, he also, well, at least I think that moment, even though it's comedic, also kind of shows the way he like makes certain attempts to connect with things that like his kids say, or like people say in general, but it's kind of like a little disconnected. And I don't know if it's just because of him as a character, or if like his age also has to like come into the part of it. But apart from that, where he's just like thick and like kind of not picking up on the cue that like Frasier. I was like, there's so many names swimming around in my brain. But when he's just kind of giving these obvious signals that he does not want to talk.
Right.
And he's kind of like putting in that like effort to kind of continue the conversation, but in a very like casual way. He also has that same sort of manner once Frasier steps him down on the table and they put on the timer, and Frasier kind of like unpacks his depression.
Right.
And then his response to that was just, "So you didn't jump, huh?"
Yeah.
He kind of likes to state the obvious.
Right.
In a way to like show that he's like listening.
Right.
But he doesn't know what else to say.
Right. Because that is in itself probably one of the most uncomfortable, alarming, and awkward conversations you could have with anybody, particularly your son. I mean, somebody's telling you they've sincerely contemplated suicide. What in the hell do you respond to that? Especially if it's in a scenario where it looks like they're in a much better place. They're just speaking about it in a retrospective manner. What do you say? Like, what do you in that moment when you're still processing? I don't know.
I appreciate the comedy of him mentioning that he could finally turn his eyelid inside out.
Right. Comparing Frasier almost jumping off a ledge? Off a ledge to him being painfully...
He's like, it hurt.
Yeah. Painfully flipping his eyelids upside. That is a very Martin moment. And I think Martin doesn't necessarily seem to be the overthinker. So for him, he was able to correlate a physical pain, a younger physical pain, to the pain that the mental and emotional pain that Frasier was going through.
I also think maybe he was almost heading towards an emotional pain moment, talking initially about looking through the photos of his wife. And I think it kind of implies it, because you can kind of see on Frasier's expression that, like, he's very invested in what he's about to say.
Right.
And then he, like, completely turns that around where he's like, and something got in my eye.
Yes. And I think that's the way that the writers keep it.
They definitely intended that.
Yeah, that the writers keep it light. You know, the writers, it's a heavy topic and it's a heavy episode, and yet somehow we come out of it feeling, you know, like funny and, you know, lighthearted. Can I ask you a question? What did you think about the moment when you saw Frasier admitting to his father that he might want him to move out and his father refusing? What did you think about that scenario?
That's a tough question. I think I don't know, it just gives me the idea that these two characters are obviously opposites.
Okay.
And then this sort of a way, Martin is the opposite of Frasier because he's kind of forcing a commitment. And it seems like Frasier's someone who's running away from commitments. Running away from, like, a failed marriage and kind of leaving his son, even if the way he implies it, where he's like, I'm separated from my boy, where I'm like, I don't know if there was, like, some marriage issue where, like, he can't be with his son or something like that. Like, if that was in, like, in the divorce papers or whatever. But either way, like, in some matters of the ways, like, he's very away from his child.
Right.
Like, drastically. And then there's his dad, who is making this, like, very aggressive effort to be like, no, we're staying together. We are going to stick with this for years if it takes us that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Frasier needs, even if he doesn't want it.
Right.
I think that scene also had a lot of strong acting. I mentioned this before in our first episode, where I think the casting was done very well.
Right.
And their chemistry was like, it was very smooth. I think, like, their bickering back and forth
seemed very natural.
It was very natural. Yes. A little too natural for a father and son relationship. But I mean, they're very talented actors, clearly. But apart from, like, their casting, I think the little bits that we get to see of Niles and Ross in this episode were also very nice to see.
Right, because they meet, correct? This is the episode that they meet.
No, I don't remember that.
Is this not the episode that they meet?
No.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. You're saying Ross and Niles.
Yes.
I don't know why you said Daphne. I was like, oh yeah, this is the episode that they meet. No, they don't meet until a few more episodes. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, Ross and the interaction with Ross and Niles
is it a treat?
It's a treat. It's a huge one also to set up the type of man that Niles is, the type of character that Niles is.
Really?
You don't think so?
Is he gonna be a little sexist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's no that I'm not ruining anything for you. He definitely is an elitist. He is most definitely has a lot of misogynistic comments made about Ross and about certain other people and women in his lives, and you'll see that come across.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I think maybe the Niles wow factor that you had in the beginning might, dwindle down as the episodes go.
You think I'm gonna fight him?
I don't think you're gonna fight him, because even though he says it's one of those where the man who has the least to say about somebody else is always the one talking the most.
He's all bark and no bite.
Most definitely.
Makes sense.
But what were you going to say about Ross and Niles meetup or, introduction, even though technically it is not their introduction.
It's not their introduction. I was just gonna say there wasn't as much of them in this episode, but they still seemed very like fun and lighthearted so far. I think I would like to see more of all like three of the Cranes together a lot more, since their interaction in the first episode when they were all like first getting set up in Frasier's apartment was pretty fun. And I think the sort of back and forth reaction of two very similar but also very different brothers and then their dad that they kind of like butt heads with would be very fun.
Yes, you're waiting for that relationship to kind of be fully explored in the show.
Yeah. I'm waiting for all three of the gang to be together.
Were you gonna say crane and gang and said grang?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing it out. Thought you were gonna edit it out, but thanks, bro.
That's all right.
Thanks a lot.
Now whatever listeners
guy.
out there can be included. What else do you have to say about the show? About this episode?
Apart from that, I also this can't fit anywhere else into my opinions.
Right. But it can be a little side comment.
But it can be a little side
A little
comment.
footnote.
A little footnote.
Okay.
Exactly. One.
You're like 1A.
1A.
With
the addition of eggshells and allspice into the coffee sounds disgusting.
Okay.
Have you tried it
No,
before?
but I'm like, what is the point of that?
I don't fucking know. According to Martin, it gave it what was it? Did he say a zing to it or a zest? Either way, I don't want a zing or a zest to my
Because
coffee.
I can maybe sort of understand the allspice.
I'm like, that's a seasoning.
Right. I can maybe understand the allspice.
I add cinnamon to my coffee.
Exactly. We add cinnamon to our coffee, and that is,
A1.
chef's kiss. But what is maybe we should buy some allspice and try it out next time. I don't know.
I think we have some allspice.
You
in
do?
here. I don't know.
Well, we'll see. We can try it on and report back, but I don't know what the eggshells is for.
I don't want to put eggshells in my coffee. I'm so sorry.
What flavor does eggshells have?
I don't know.
Is it like an umami flavor? I really don't understand.
Umami flavor. I think it's an egg flavor.
An egg flavor?
I
really
gives
don't
it flavor
understand.
of egg.
I don't understand.
So that was my first thing that was bugging me the whole episode because it's introduced very early on.
Right.
And I'm like, that is disgusting. I want to enjoy Daphne as a character, but I am scared of what she's like feeding them.
Well, she is English.
Exactly. Exactly.
She is English.
I'm just like, what is she going to make them? Is she going to make them that toast sandwich that's just like 3 pieces of bread sliced together?
What?
Isn't that a thing? Or was that like a meme? The toast sandwich? Or it's just like 3 pieces of bread?
That has got to be a meme.
I feel like it's a meme, probably. But I mean, the English worry me quite a bit.
Yes, they worry me as well. You're not the only one. Don't worry.
Yeah. Pray for Daphne.
Yes.
But apart from that, it disgusted me a lot, but it brought me back to the fact that like you in the first half asked me about Starbucks and stuff like that.
Right.
Since they dropped the name.
Right, the household name.
The household name.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a little bit of digging, and it was like peak at like the kind of like point where it was getting big.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because according to the Encyclopedia Britannica online, when it was founded in 1971 by like 3 different dudes, and then eventually there was this one guy who was working with them who was just like, hey, you guys have this as like a coffee like selling business, like just like the bean itself and stuff like that, and like equipment selling business, but what if we also made it into a cafe like they do in like Italy and yada yada? Because he was like really smitten by the idea of like cafes because he went to Milan and everything like that.
Okay.
And they weren't really into that idea.
The Starbucks creators were not into
the
idea.
the three creators weren't really like super into it.
Okay.
So then he leaves the company
and he creates his
Pete's Coffee?
No.
Oh.
Although Pete's Coffee actually had like a partnership with these 3 Starbucks dudes.
That's what I was gonna say, right? Aren't they like a rivalry?
Sort of. It feels like almost like Pete kind of encouraged them. Because Pete started out first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. According to the encyclopedia.
Okay.
Pete started out first. And
Encyclopedia or Wikipedia, bitch? Those are very different things. Encyclopedia or Wikipedia?
Frankly, Wikipedia should be respected more.
I am not disrespecting it, but you cannot. The one is not like the other.
It's an encyclopedia.
An online is no. If it's Wikipedia, say Wikipedia.
No, it's an online encyclopedia. It was the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Like this shit was peer reviewed.
Okay, all right.
Or at least I think that's what it is, right?
I don't know, but okay, let's keep going.
Okay. I'm not even going to talk about Pete's Coffee because that's a completely separate coffee company.
I'm sorry.
But I'll tell you that later in a private conversation if you're curious.
Yes, please. I am very curious.
But this other guy who's not part of the main 3.
Okay.
Was like, let's do a cafe. And they were like, nah, bro. And so he's like, fuck this shit. I'm out. And he makes his own like brand that's like a cafe store. And he starts making a bunch of little like cafes. Like, he gets it, like, successful off the bat.
So he's able to franchise.
And then eventually, the 3 dudes are just like, yo, like, he's actually, like, he's making it work out there.
Right.
And so the guy who ran it actually buys Starbucks off of them. And then eventually makes it into, like, a cafe. And then, by, in the period of, like, 1987 to 1992... in like 4 years, it goes from like 20 stores to like over 100 stores in the US.
Wow.
Yeah, dude. Like, it was a huge spread.
Yeah.
Like in 4 years. And this show
How
came
the
out.
fuck do you manage that much growth, man? In 4 years.
I don't fucking know. Dude.
How the
This dude drank a lot of coffee. He was fucking on that shit.
I think it was a little more than coffee, for being real. Like, how the fuck do you manage that growth?
I don't fucking know.
In 4 years, 100 stores.
Yeah.
100 stores. Wow. But I mean, obviously they most likely come from money.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, most likely.
Sure,
but
bro.
Wow, that is to me really mind-boggling that in 4 years you're up 100 stores.
No, yeah, it was insane to me. And that's kind of, I think that's also why it makes sense that it showed up in this show at this time. Because I saw on Hulu, and it lists as the show being broadcasted in 1993,
okay.
I think. So that's, like, right on the cusp of when it was, like, getting, like, really big.
Right. Which makes sense as to why Frasier, because I feel like now, if it was filmed in today's date, he would not have mentioned a Starbucks
They
blend.
could not afford to mention Starbucks.
No, not even, they could probably afford to mention it, but it wouldn't be as significant. I don't think, even though we do talk about Starbucks cultural impact, I think in that moment when it was first starting out, you got to think about the exclusivity of Starbucks, and so almost the
That's true.
What is like the word that I'm trying to think of? Like the exclusivity, and I think Starbucks was known as like a premium brand.
Yeah.
And I think now Starbucks today, no offense, is not necessarily known to be a premium brand. It's known for convenience and for availability and also for familiarity. That you go into any Starbucks and you know what you're going to get. You know that it's going to taste the same in every single Starbucks, most likely. And you know that what you're going to pay.
Yeah.
I don't think that most people go into Starbucks thinking quality. I'm sorry. I don't think that's the case. At least for many in the hipster, cafe specialists,
quote unquote coffee lovers.
Right, coffee lovers, coffee experts. I don't think they go into Starbucks expecting quality. So I don't think a character like Frasier placed in today's date would mention Starbucks as like the be all of coffees.
You think he'd be like, my Pete's coffee?
No, most definitely not Pete's either. I don't think he would say. I think he would.
My Better Buzz.
He would probably say another, very well off brand. He would probably say something like Café Vernano or what's that other one? Parazza. is that what it's called? You know, he would probably say like some really deep Italian brand, you know, like an actual Italian coffee.
Yeah.
I don't think he would say Starbucks blend, but that is very interesting. It's so funny to like be able to look back and catch this little cultural shifts within the show.
Yeah, for sure. But that's
similar to what we were talking about in the beginning of the episode, in the first episode about the interior decor. And how within that time frame, it most likely was the best interior decoration possible. I would assume coming right off of, you know, the vibrant, colorful 80s.
Yeah. Because it also kind of goes into play with his character itself, where it's like, while it might not have been the style that everyone was going for someone like Frasier, who's into the high arts or whatever, and like has a very like sophisticated view of himself, that style is definitely what he's going for.
Correct.
But my gosh, dude, does he just like not like colors? A little shade of blue, maybe some green. Oh, a pink would look lovely with his eyes.
I'm not sure. I mean, maybe we can run that by. I had heard rumors that there was going to be a Frasier reboot or like a Frasier reunion.
Really?
I don't know if that actually was going to go through with it, especially after COVID. But I had heard that. True. I had heard that a few years ago, and I was super excited for it.
Whoa, David Hyde Pierce, man. Get on it. I think I can put it on my ending note here, which was kind of a reflection of like the last scene and tying it back to the first episode as well as the title. Where once we kind of see that like they've decided that like they're going to try and make this work, that Frasier then in the little like end snippet when it's playing the theme song, it shows him in like that basement thing. I don't know where that place is, and he's in his like little chair there and he's reading in that area.
Right. It's the storage basement from his complex.
Like, yeah. And it looks so nasty in there.
It looks like a Saw movie. Right?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like a Saw movie. I
feel like I'm gonna see a rat in there. And like not like Remy the rat.
Right.
Not a nice French rat. But in that scene, I think the idea of like him, because he's kind of like, he looks like comfy in there and he looks happy in that scene.
Right.
And it's obviously because he's like finally happy having like some time to himself. But I think it also ties in with the fact that it's like, this is this quest for his like own space. And in a way, it's also tied in with the idea that he was mourning what his life used to be.
Okay.
He was also mourning the fact that he's like losing these ways that he got to know himself better.
Okay.
Because when you get familiar with a routine that makes you what you believe is your best self, and you have to change that, I mean, you're mourning that as well. But you're also discovering like new spaces.
Correct.
That can like bring out that same person or someone even better. And I think that's like it was a silly little like set piece, but I think it kind of leads to something more positive.
I think so too. I mean, I think it definitely, you know, it can't all be rainbows and butterflies. And I think he is very happy about the strides he's making with his father. And at the same time, he's also sad for the loss of his space and freedom. You know, there has to be a balance in everything. This episode to me was always really interesting because you and I, up until very recently, had always shared a room.
Yeah.
And now living on our own, I can really, I have a lot more sympathy about during this episode than I did in the previous years that I watched it while I was still sharing a room. Because I think it was a luxury space was a luxury that I never really had like that.
Yeah.
And once you no longer have that space to yourself and that independence and autonomy, man, it really is like a mourning period, and it completely makes you have to reevaluate your routine, your discipline, and your habits. And I don't know if you relate to that.
No, I do. I think it also feels different sharing a space with family as it is with like a roommate as well. Because you're kind of set in the same routine when you're a family. So it's kind of a bit easier to adjust to sharing a space together. because we both had to wake up at the same time to go to school. We both kind of had the same closet to share our clothes in, stuff like that. But I think with someone like Frasier, where his own like study is being like taken apart to make room for like a stranger and stuff like that, can probably feel very like intrusive.
Yes.
And scary. Even if he's a grown man, like it's still a change of environment.
Yes.
That's upsetting to anyone.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully we'll see him be more acquainted to the people in his life now. And within the new episodes, we can see him not so sad and not so mournful of his loss of space, but more so welcoming and grateful for the relationships that he has. But we'll see. We'll see within the next episode.
All right, then. Well, that wraps up our second episode for Otra Vez Frasier.
Come back next time as we discuss the third episode. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.